Welcome back to the WWIA Podcast. We hope you're enjoying this special podcast series on the John McDaniel story. If you are, please do us a favor and leave us a review on iTunes, Spotify, or your preferred podcast service. Let's learn more about John's military service as we dive into Part 8, the final chapter, SOCOM.
All right. It's a little Buddy Holly and the Crickets.
I'm gonna tell you how it's gonna be.
I love it.
Are you gonna give your love to me?
There you go. Taking it back for you. Okay, so here I am back at you as promised. And what I'm going to do here is finish up. I think there's maybe one or two more chapters, left here in the rest of my story. And I think where I last left off was I was just coming out of the Joint Forces Staff College there in Suffolk, Virginia, getting ready to go to SOCOM. So yeah, let me pick up there. So I'm a lieutenant colonel. Okay, I get to SOCOM in 2005, and I've got a couple years before I got my 20, and I can hang up my tennis shoes, so to speak. And I've got no illusions at this point that I'm going to go on and do anything else. I've committed to retiring. But I did request an assignment, volunteered and requested an assignment back at Special Operations Command here in Tampa, coming out of the Florida Keys after a year of school up in Virginia. And, I'm feeling, I think inside, I remember feeling like, I need to get in this fight. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I think the best thing for me, at this stage is, to get back to SOCOM where, I've got the greatest chance of doing something, meaningful, I guess is what's on my mind at the time. And so, I get there and, they've got me immediately, involved in, some things that, do involve my skill set, leveraging, my operational skill set in the information operations arena and space operations arena and my operational background and all this. I think we certainly, was on a great team, and we certainly moved the football down the field a little bit, I think. But, SOCOM got tagged with being the global, synchronizer of the global war on terror, the GWAT, as we referred to it as. And so, the war is raging. In the time is 2005. Iraq is just an absolute beehive, and dudes are getting chewed up left and right. And I'm slugging it out every day in the trench, back and forth to SOCOM from Apollo Beach. I'm taking my skiff, across the bay, and I've got a GS 650 BMW, parked at the marina at MacDill Airforce Base. So I start my day by get my uniform on, do a little PT, get my uniform on, and run my skiff flat out across Tampa Bay like a scalded ape with my hair on fire. And it takes me about 8 minutes to get from Apollo Beach to the MacDill Marina. I park my boat there and I get on my GS 650 and I just haul it into the compound. So I'm starting my day every day at SOCOM doing my two of my most favorite things to do. I'm on the water, I'm boating, and I'm on a motorcycle. So that worked out most days unless the fog socked me in. But the hard part was going home because, and at least in the summertime anyway, because Tampa Bay gets a lot of storms. So I was but I didn't care. So I get wet and getting caught in a few storms. Here and there, but it was just great, I and then I got to fish on the way home, so that was my life. But getting back to my work there, helping to, synchronize the global war on terror with all the combatant commanders and their staffs was like a super difficult thing to do. We all struggled with that. We didn't know, most of us said, like, what does that mean? Synchronizing the global war on terror. Really, I think at the end of the day, that's, the word synchronization in relative to, a very complex problem set that, defeating, the global terror, the networks, the terrorist networks, across the globe at this point, and the efforts against them. That's a heavy lift, and so we were sorting that out. And I don't go too far into that, but I think by and large we did a pretty good job of doing that, prosecuting the war. But for me, I volunteered. For the record, I volunteered 7 times to get out of here and go over there and do something. And I was told, on every occasion, no, hey, blah, 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 we need you here, you're doing this thing in the interagency task force, blah, 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 and so I just finally dropped my retirement paperwork and everybody's like, oh, John, we'd like to keep you. What can we do for you, John? And I'm like, well, I asked to get deployed like 7 times and you turned me down. Would you like to go? I'm like, no, I'm not asking an 8th time. My mind's made up. Here's my packet. I love you all, but I'm retiring. Good night, everybody. No, and that's what happened. I unceremoniously, retired. And, that's it. I'm not bitter, not at all. I don't know what I would have done if they'd have sent me over there anyway, but, I guess I would have probably felt better being in theater than back here, in the rear with the gear. But, everybody's got a job to do. You do your best at whatever they give you to do, and so that's what happened. And, I wanted to mention that, because this dovetails, certainly dovetails into the foundation, the WWIA, the charity, the Wounded Warriors in Action Foundation that I started back in, 2007. So, yeah, what I used to do was go to the James A. Haley Poly Trauma Center, and that's here in Tampa. And it is, at the time, it was one of 2 polytrauma centers. And when I say polytrauma, I mean traumatic brain injury and spinal cord injury guys and gals, mostly guys, because, that's who's on the front lines. But, lots of, unfortunately, women are getting, injured and, as well in this thing. It's just an indiscriminate, way of fighting a war. But, nonetheless, I used to go up to the James A. Haley Polytrauma Center on, I think it was the 6th Ward, and forced myself to go up there in uniform and just, see the guys, hey, bring some magazines with me, hunting magazines and stuff. And, it was absolutely heartbreaking to see, young men, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, in the hospital after they had got wounded in theater, probably, transported to Germany, and then back over here to these polytrauma centers. These are the worst of the worst guys. These are guys that are, most of whom will probably never walk again. They're all, either if you get a traumatic brain injury or a spinal cord injury, things are real bad. Okay, and there's guys up there chewing on rubber balls so they don't swallow their tongue. All right, now that might be hard to, visualize, but trust me, that's what's going on up there. Moms and dads and girlfriends and wives and kids, all standing around bedside, and been up there for weeks, hoping that their loved one is going to recover. And, in some cases you could look at them and just go, yeah, thinking to yourself, that might not happen. You can hear there's a jet going over right now. I'm back at SOCOM in the Airstream, but the F-22 Raptor has been flying around. I love it. But anyway, so I'd go up there not infrequently, just to to remind myself of the horrors of war. and what it was doing to our, to the home team. So up there at the Poly Trauma Center, you've got, Marines, mostly Marines and Army guys, because that's, that's who's on the front lines, taking it in the teeth for the most part. And so I met a lady by the name of Mary Donovan, who was their recreational therapist. And I kind of developed a relationship, with her because she would see me not infrequently up there. And I said, hey, how about, I said, I want to do something. And I guess that's at the end of the day, as I was thinking about what I was going to do, getting ready to retire at SOCOM, everybody says, find something that you're passionate about and figure out a way to make a career out of it, or figure out how to make a difference in the world doing it. And, I took that very seriously, and I wrote down on a piece of paper, the things I was really passionate about. And I was like, okay, what's number one? How about this country? I'm very passionate about this country. I'm very patriotic. I'm very passionate about the men and women who, get wounded in combat. And I have a huge soft spot in my heart for the average soldier or Marine, who was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, wore our country's uniform, bled in our boots. That to me is like, I don't know, man, that just hits me every time that hits me. It still does, just so anyway, those two things I'm absolutely passionate about. And I was like, okay, well, what else? And I was like, well, hunting and fishing. It's like, so I started kicking around this idea of, taking guys hunting and fishing, to help them in their recovery efforts, and because I knew what going out to the woods did for me. It always reset my headspace and my timing, so I figured it probably would do that for others. And, at the time I wasn't expecting there, to be a lot of people that wanted to help me do that. I was fortunate in, I had been doing some things, that allowed me to have the kind of resource where I could, do these things without asking people for help, at least for a period of time. So that's what I did. And I said to Mary Donovan, I was like, it was obvious that I wasn't taking any of these guys hunting or fishing. You can't, they were, most of them were, never going to walk again, and the effects of their, case of traumatic brain injury, it was just beyond my ability to do that. So I thought, I got to thinking, I was driving home one day and I heard on the radio, that Van Halen was coming to the St. Pete Times Forum, which, now is Amelie Arena, but, the big arena downtown, sports arena downtown, where they hold concerts when there's not a hockey game, and big venues sort of thing. So there was an advertisement on the radio that said Van Halen was coming to the St. Pete Times Forum. And, oh, by the way, it was the first time that that David Lee Roth was going to reunite with the band, with Eddie Van Halen. And so they broke up. I mean, I'm not a huge Van Halen fan. I've probably got, several of their albums or CDs somewhere. But, so I thought, well, geez, why don't I get a suite, and go and ask Mary Donovan if she would be willing to get these guys out of the hospital and go to a rock and roll concert. So as soon as I said that to her, she's like, heck yeah. I was like, really? She's, yeah. I said, okay, cool. So I got the suite, and, comes the day for the concert, and I'm standing out front of the arena, and, we had a schedule. Okay, they'll be here at this time. 2 monster buses from the VA show up, the doors open up, and, out pops Mary Donovan and some staff members, and they start getting these guys, who are on this bus, out of the bus, who are on their wheelchairs, and, and we're all kind of getting ready to go up to the suite, and I'm, meeting some of the guys, and they're all staring at me kind of like with a scowl on their face, like, who are you and what do you want? It's like, my name's John McDaniel, and I'm just, I'm happy that you're here. let's go rock and roll, man. And so, we got everybody up to the suite, and boom, here they come, and it was on, and obviously we're not serving any alcohol. These guys are all, on medication. That they some of them are able to work their phones, and so they're recording the concert, and we're all having fun. I'm looking at the staff, and everybody start tapping their foot and moving it to the music, and I was like, okay, I don't know how this is going to go, but it looks like it's going good. And so fast forward the tape till the next morning, I get the guys back on the bus. They, bye everybody. And the next morning, it's like 8 o'clock in the morning. My phone's buzzing, and I look at it. And it's Mary Donovan. I was like, "Hey, Mary, how you doing? Good morning." She's like, "Listen to this," and she takes her phone and just kind of puts it out in the air, and you can hear, Van Halen, on the 6th floor at the Polytrauma Center, James A. Haley just rocking. And the dudes are loving it. She goes, "This place is electric, man." She goes, "It's great. Thank you." And I said, "Oh, you're so welcome." So, the point of telling that story is that hey, you don't need a piece of paper to do good. Okay. I mean, I have a registered charity with we're a 501c3, I won't go too far into all of that, but the only difference between that and not having one is, people, if you have a charity, people can give you a registered charity with the IRS. People can give you money, and you can use that money for your cause, and you just don't have to pay taxes on it. See, that's the thing. And so, but this is all before I had the charity established. And my point of saying that is, you don't need a piece of paper to do good. Okay. And so it's just my way of sort of validating this idea of, do I really want to do this? So then I started taking guys hunting and fishing. I had a place at I went down and bought a place, went down to the Florida Keys, bought another place. So I was bouncing back and forth between, the Florida Keys and Tampa and my property in the Northwoods of Wisconsin. And that's what I was doing. I was taking guys hunting and fishing, between the Florida Keys and the Northwoods of Wisconsin. And it was, at the time, it was just onesies and twosies. It wasn't like at the scale that it is today. Today we've got 50 missions in 35 different states, and a couple of foreign countries that we've done missions in. So, the foundation's grown. There's something like 5,000, last time we counted like 5,000 volunteers across the country pitching in to make this thing work. But back then it was me, a boat, a chunk of land, and a dog, and a bunch of guns and fishing poles, and that's what I was doing. I was doing the eaches. Guys, lots of my good friends were, calling me up, that were battalion and brigade commanders, saying, "Hey, John, here's the name and a number of a guy that, got banged up. He's a super dude. Why don't you see if you can help him out?" That's how it all started. And so, we've now morphed into this, thing where we're operating in small groups, and there's leadership involved. We've got our Purple Heart, select Purple Heart recipients, going through our guide school, and it's very, formal, well planned, and well executed operations now. But, at the time, it was just, sort of me doing my thing, sorting this all out. So, yeah, I just wanted to and just kind of set this thing up, because that's how it started, in the name Wounded Warriors in Action. Actually, a good friend of mine I was at SOCOM with. He was also a lieutenant colonel, and we were in the advanced course together. His name's Rich Wheeler, and a.k.a. Wheels. And Wheels and I were sitting down, just kind of, I was telling him what I was thinking I was going to do. And I said, "Well, what are you going to call it?" And I was like, we're just kind of, I haven't figured it out yet, sort of thing. And he came up with the Wounded Warriors in Action, to kind of dovetail off of Rangers in Action, which, I was part of. I was when I was at the RTB, I often volunteered to do the Helocast in the Rangers in Action thing, which is a demonstration for, dignitaries and Rangers that are getting ready to go to the course. We show everything from hand-to-hand combat to, repelling, advanced repelling, and all this stuff, to include Helocast, which is, basically jumping out of a helicopter into water, chasing an RB-15 raft. It's pretty cool to watch guys, exit, a helicopter into a body of water, and called the helocast, and so chasing their gear and chasing the boat and then, going off and doing your thing. So, when he said that, I was like, yeah, I like that. I like that. Ranger, Wounded Warriors in Action. Okay, cool. So that's what I went with, WWIA. So Rich gets, credit for naming that. Or coming up with a name. So, pretty cool. And that's my story at SOCOM. I had a great time. I genuinely did. I mean, I love being back in the arena, but, and I'm not going to, I'm not casting any dispersions or anything, but I will tell you that, often I felt like I was, it's to say making sausage, that nobody wanted to eat, at SOCOM and during the global war on, the GWAT synchronization bit, and there was, I won't talk about, I can't talk about or won't talk about, details of what we were doing, with whom we were doing it and all this. It just doesn't matter and it'd bore you to tears. But I will say that it was a lot of staff work, a lot of hard work. But I would often just refer to it as sausage making. I didn't make that up. Other people did, but somebody else did. I first heard it and I was like, that's appropriate, because if you watch somebody make sausage and see what they put in it, you just never eat it. And that's sort of what was happening at SOCOM, I thought, in support of the GWAT. So, anyway, it was a great time. And I unceremoniously retired. I didn't even have a retirement ceremony. I just they gave me a shadow box that was all screwed up. That's funny. It's supposed to have all your military awards in it and whatnot. And some Navy dude, God bless him, put it together for me. He's like, "Hey, sir, here you go. I did my best off your O or B, your officer record brief." And I looked and I said, "Thank you very much." And I put it in my trunk and. Never looked at it again. It's just, and then I went to Camp Hackett. I bought a 40-foot fifth wheeler. I packed it full of all my stuff, all my gear, all my kit, and I hauled it up to the North Woods of Wisconsin, and I lived like Jeremiah Johnson, from, the early, I remember I retired in, I think my date is November of 2007, some point, but I had 60 days of leave. So, I was pulling chalks out of here in September, maybe August even, and then heading up to North Woods of Wisconsin. I stayed that year all the way up through into January, through Christmas and into January, until everything just froze solid, and I was spending more time trying to stay alive than I was trying to, hunt and do my thing up there. So, I eventually crawled out of the woods, frozen and everything else. But I was like, this is what I'm doing. I am full on committed to this thing. And then things started to grow and morph, and that's not the point of this podcast, is not to tell too much about the WWIA, because there's other podcasts out there that'll do that for you. But that's my military career. Super proud of what I did. I think I gave it my best, and I certainly put the Johnny Mac twist on everything I did. But I think you have to do that. To be true to yourself and, enjoy what you're doing, which I thoroughly did. I mean, I wouldn't change anything about my military career. Not one thing, even pointing my finger, at a lieutenant colonel and going through Ranger School twice. I wouldn't change it, because it's who you are, and you learn from those lessons. And I think that's what I think, the takeaway here is, the life hack is, hey, you can't change the past. You can't. You might be a fast runner, but you're never going to outrun your past. So don't spend any time worrying about it, and I coulda, shoulda, woulda. You can't live that way. But how you can live is go, I did this, I did that, and I could have done this better, and I could have done that better, and I probably shouldn't have done that, and you take those things, okay, those little pearls, that's wisdom, okay, and it's only wisdom if you apply it, okay. You got to learn from the things, that you did or didn't do. And that's sometimes just as important. I heard one of my good friends, of course, I've mentioned Dixon before, but, his father, I guess on his, in his late years as he was, I guess, ill and passing, said to his second son, Derek, when Derek asked him about regret, and Colonel Gunther said, this is Jack Gunther, Dixon's dad, said, well, it's better to regret the things in life that you've done versus the things you haven't done. And I thought about that, and ever since, he relayed that story to me, and I was like, yeah, oath, that's true. So anyway, learn from what you did, learn from what you didn't do, and apply it to present and future. And that's how you become a better person. And that's how you don't make the same mistakes twice, And so that's, I guess, the life hack that I wanted to share with you. I genuinely appreciate your time. I'm curious if anybody actually made it through all of these different podcasts to listen to my story. I thought it was important to share. I was encouraged to do it, so I've done it. I hope you've enjoyed it. And God bless you, and thank you very much for your time and listening.
To learn more about the mission of the Wounded Warriors in Action Foundation and how you can get involved, please visit our website at WWIAF.org or follow our social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Thank you for listening to the WWIA Podcast and for helping us honor, connect, and heal our combat-wounded Purple Heart heroes through the power of the great outdoors.
If you like what you're listening to here and would like to join our team in our mission to bring healing power and recovery to America's Purple Heart heroes, please become part of our Sponsor a Hero team by clicking on the link in the podcast notes or by going to WWIAF.org/sponsor. That's WWIAF.org/sponsor. Our heroes need you now more than ever. Thank you.